Thank you for the very kind introduction. This will truly be something different than what you just heard. I'm blown away by the speakers here and by the speeches and by all of you. I have to say, I go to a lot of meetings. I talk to a lot of different crowds. I've been going to the wrong meetings. This is wonderful, and I'm extremely grateful. It's a brave thing to invite an academic to speak to a general audience, because generally when you ask an academic what they do, you're in for a long haul. So in the next 3 hours, I'm going to tell you about, no, I'm just kidding. My goal is to make this accessible to you, and that we can all learn something. And I'm going to tell you about my favorite things in science. And just briefly, I'm not going to give you a long CV or bio, but my father's a scientist. I grew up in the science game. My mother writes children's books, so I grew up in the storytelling game. And really, for me, my birth as a scientist was at 6. I asked my dad what he did. He told me that he was a physicist. I said, that sounds cool, I want to do that, because I was a young child who wanted to be like his dad. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. The natural world will be figured out eventually and soon. You want to understand something really mysterious. And I said, like what? And he said, that thing in your head, your brain. And I had actually never thought about the fact that my brain was in my head before. And since that day, whenever I meet a child, I always say, where's your brain? And I make them point. And it's an important thing. And today we're actually going to spend a little time on that fact and why it's very useful. All right. So today I'd also like to offer you something that I like to think is very powerful as a practice. And some of these topics have come up in the various talks. So as I give my description, you're going to hear some themes that have come up before. Things about emotion, about strong emotion, about the power of strong emotion, about the power of understanding what your brain does and how that can be useful. Okay, so the title of my talk is Neurohacking for Massively Accelerated Brain Change. And why is that? So this is the world I live in. I'm a neuroscientist at Stanford University, which, I'm not going to claim any responsibility for this, but by all objective measures is one of the greatest research institutions on the planet. And it's an amazing place because people always are thinking about the future and how to serve humanity. And that's one of the things that makes me feel so honored to be there as a faculty member. So my life, this is me in my daily habitat, working at the microscope or pipetting, mixing fluids and that sort of thing, or lecturing to large crowds of undergraduates or medical students, teaching them neuroanatomy and things of that sort. I love this job. I feel like I was born to do it. And my favorite day of the week is Monday, and always has been. So there you go. So the world, that's how I feel, and I appreciate the support. And I think that's what we're all looking for. So my world is one of genetics, big pharma. I consult for a number of biotech companies. We're interested in medications, FDA trials, all that stuff that, frankly, is wonderful because it's based in some important things, which are the reason I went into science is about facts, not opinions. It's about truths, not trends. So unless I stop today and tell you some otherwise, I'm going to be distilling down a number of facts. Factual science, laboratory science, I'd be happy to give you the references if you'd like them. But I'm not going to go into everything. The problem with all this is that it's very slow, right? It's slow. We're all waiting eagerly, patiently, in some cases desperately, for important treatments for disease or for ways to better enhance our life through our brain science. And it's slow, and we're impatient as a species, which is a good thing. Because you also have this thing, which isn't about how the brain works, but neurohacking, which I call how to work the brain. Okay? So I think that's why we're here. We want to understand how to better work our brains. And this, give it a name, give it Reiki, acupuncture, freezing yourself, cryo, drugs, whatever it happens to be, whatever your kick is. This is one of my favorite people. Some of you might recognize Wim Hof, the great Wim Hof, who figured out that if you essentially make yourself ice cold and learn to control your breathing, you can learn to control a lot of aspects of your brain. I encourage you to look up Wim's work. He's doing fabulous work, and we're going to be doing more at Stanford with Wim on trauma control, pain management, and so forth. He holds a number of world records. He walked up Everest in his shorts and bare feet, Kilimanjaro, 20 Guinness World Records. Impressive guy. There's also a lot of ingestibles. So a lot of people they ask me, I want my brain to work better. What should I take? That's our tendency. What should I take? What should I put in my body to make it better? Today I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about things you can put in your body to make your brain work better and the future of that. I'm also going to talk about behavioral changes that you can make, which simply allow you to do things to make your brain better on demand, because you need both, really, and I'd like to encourage that point. So generally, the two kinds of neurohacks are behavioral, do this or don't do that. So I could tell you do something and don't do something else. We've heard, and those are very useful. Or ingest this and then don't take that. And we sort of you can organize things into more or less this kind of framework. So my two professional life goals outside the world of neurohacking are very simple, and I just feel like I'm obligated to share them with you because my general life mission is to understand what makes us human, how the brain works. And that's been my obsession since I was 6. It's my obsession today. And when I die, my hope is that I will have made an important contribution in trying to understand how the brain organizes our lives into meaning, how we form relationships, and really understand the biology, really understand it. And the purpose of that is not just because I enjoy doing it, although I do. The purpose is to discover new ways to relieve suffering. So most of my laboratory works on ways to regenerate nerve cells, which they don't like to do. Nerve cells in your brain and spinal cord don't naturally regenerate. We, unfortunately, unlike other animals in the animal kingdom, don't naturally regenerate those cells. And so in a case like childhood blindness or early onset glaucoma is a disease that we devote a lot of our attention to. You go blind and you never get vision back. There's no eyeball transplantation yet. We're working on that. And so that's my professional life goal in the world of science. Now, in the world of science, I have a lot to keep me busy, as you can see. So why would I focus on neurohacking also? And this gets a little personal, and I don't have a long story. What I have are a few snapshots of how I've spent the last 30 years of my life. I've been so obsessed by biology and by the human experience that from a very young age, frankly, from the time when a lot of this stuff was considered a little fringy, but now is becoming more mainstream, I started psychoanalysis 25 years ago. You can say what you want about that. I find it to be incredible. This man, Sigmund Freud, was a genius. He got a lot of things wrong. He had sex with a few of his patients, and he did cocaine, and that gives him a bad reputation, but there are other public figures who have done far worse. So he had amazing insights about the power of the subconscious, and so much of that we're hearing about in the talks is about the power of subconscious, and I'm gonna talk more about that. I'm also obsessed with hypnosis. I do daily hypnosis and have for a long time now. It's a very, very powerful way to get below your cortex, below your conscious experience, and to change your brain. It's something that really needs more research to back it up, but we already know it works. So I loved Emily's quote the other day, that neuroscience is finally catching up to what these Indian dudes have known for a long time. I don't think I got it exactly right, but that is an amazing insight, and we need the message to get out there, and hats off to all of you for being really, I view this group in all seriousness, as pioneers. The important thing is to get that message out very broadly. If it's isolated, it's a problem. If it ripples out, the more it ripples out, the better. And we're all gonna look forward to a time when these kinds of things like hypnosis, hopefully psychoanalysis too, other forms of therapy, new forms of nootropics. I definitely have experimented with a number of different nootropics, and I'm a big believer in meditation. Later, I'm gonna talk about specific forms of meditation to enhance the sorts of things you want. I think meditation is wonderful. Most people are enjoying a certain practice of meditation, people who are here, and there's a lot of room for more discovery and growth of how to make meditation better in many different ways. I'm intrigued as a neuroanatomist about the chakras. I'm deeply fascinated by all these things that people have discovered. As Emily mentioned, people have already discovered this stuff for what it does, but where in the body is it? I really feel in order to get the message out broadly to a huge number of people all over the world, people like my parents who are a little bit skeptical of things like chakras and Reiki and things like that, we need to give a mechanism. It's not to bore them with mechanism, it's to convince them that this stuff is safe and really cool and extremely powerful. And without that, unfortunately, many people won't come on board. And I spend a little time in this arena too. I grew up in the boxing game. It runs in my family for whatever reason. I know a neuroscientist who boxes. It's not good for your brain, trust me. But there is something very powerful about martial arts and other forms of physical activity, whether or not it's yoga or something else, which are that they teach you something very important, which is both how to control your breath and how to control your stress response. And there are also some interesting things. And Asprey, I unfortunately arrived late, but yes, restricting ejaculation. Fighters have been doing that for ages. This is something, the Qigong practice that's for ages as a way to enhance willpower, drive, and aggression. You gotta be a little bit careful, younger guys. It can drive your aggression through the roof, so be mindful. So I'm gonna tell you in the next 10 minutes or so about 4 critical facts about the brain that you should know if you care about enhancing your life. And I'm also gonna tell you about some powerful neurohacks for increasing brain power, presence, creativity, and productivity. And I hope I have time to get through all this, so I'm gonna move a little bit more quickly. If it gets a little academic and kind of wordy, don't take notes. I'm happy to give you my slides. Just tune in a little bit, and let's just get the gestalt. Let's get the big picture here, and I'm hoping you'll come away with something of real value. All right, first thing, the brain is an organ. I take a lot of these out of a lot of heads. It's a piece of meat, okay? It's not vapors. You look in a skull, you see a brain. And so that's very powerful when you start to think about the fact that the brain has a job. Your heart's job is to pump blood through your body. The brain's job is to do mainly 3 things, okay? The brain's job is to control your behavior, your breathing, your heart rate, move you around when you want to move, okay? It's there to perceive the world, whether or not you think fruit is good or bad. In this case, I'm fairly convinced I don't want to eat a lot of fruit, and I learned a lot about that. But your ability to perceive that image and know what it is, your brain's very good at that. And then to imagine, I intentionally left that area blank. So I want you all to just think really briefly. This isn't a fun exercise, but what's your flight number coming out here? Okay, you can do that. My dog Costello can't do that. That's a uniquely human ability to think about something that's not in the room, to imagine something on demand, and to plan and to create new things. And that's very powerful. It's also what gets you into trouble. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so those are some basic truths, right? So everything that happens to you, your entire experience, I don't care what anyone says, I don't care what alignment the earth is in, everything is happening because your brain has these 3 jobs. And all of your experience is filtered through that thing in your head, that pile of cells that's arranged in a very specific way that we're still trying to understand, called your brain. Just like we could be talking about the heart, whose job is to pump blood. So I want to describe just how the brain works in 3 basic ways, 2 of which you've heard about before. We all have heard the lizard brain, the thing that freaks you out when you think there's someone standing in the corner and then you turn on the light and there's nobody, or if you were to come up on a car wreck and all of a sudden your heart's pumping. Your brain is very good at that stuff, and that's great. That's why you're alive at this moment. It is an unerring, unfailing system keeping you alive, your lizard brain, and it's generally designed to keep you alive and to scare you from doing things that would hurt you. And it's a shame, because I would have liked it to be generally good at making me feel good all the time. But that's generally not what it's good at. And I'm stealing from the great Tony Robbins, who says, there's paved roads to fear and misery and cobblestone or dirt roads to happiness. And that's true at the level of neuroanatomy. You don't have a whole lot of your brain devoted to happiness. You got a lot of your brain designed to keep you safe. So anxieties and fears come about a lot easier, and you need to combat those. We're all getting better at that. Thinking, planning, imagining, and doing is the other kind of end of the spectrum. I talked about that. And then there's the one that really counts, right? Which is this thing in the middle, which is the way that those things are connected. What do you think depends on how you feel. What you feel depends on how you think. We know this now. There's kind of common knowledge. And it's these maps of your experience. It depends on what happened to you and how you view the world. And we know this at a psychological level. Neuroscientists sometimes talk like this. They often don't. I'm in the minority. But there's a lot of neuroanatomy, there's a lot of powerful neuroscience to support this. What do I mean by your maps of experience? I mean what happened to you shapes how you view the world. And so what's important is how you change how you view the world if you want to go forward beyond what would just how you were programmed, let's say. All right, so again, this is where it gets a little dense, and I promise it gets a little more fun. So this is where you get meaning, right, or your maps of experience. And I'll talk about where those meanings come from. All this other stuff is really urgent, it has to do with on demand. Keep your heart pumping. Keep yourself breathing. That's happening moment to moment, and it's below your conscious detection. If you think about it, you can notice it, but otherwise it's below your conscious detection. And then there's the stuff that is really why you're here, if you think about it, which is your future and evolution. So where you get meaning is super important. If meaning is what gives all your experiences their significance, right, and they're these maps that I'm talking about in very vague terms, what are those about? And we've heard a lot about them. We heard a great talk yesterday, or the day before rather, about how you can take fear and then change its meaning and turn it into something powerful, right? So that's exactly what I'm talking about. But that was something that, as an adult, that she did, right? So why fear? Why do we have fears? Why do we have trauma? Why do we have shame? And here's the stinger. It was all set up for you in your youth. I don't want to focus on the bad, but most of this stuff when you're young, you're just a passive learning machine. It's all coming in. Little kids are learning 3 languages with no accents flexibly. They're not even thinking about it. They're learning instruments. Someone asked a great question the other day at the workshop. Wait, now I know I want all that stuff. How come it's so much tougher? And there's a lot of biology that I'd be happy to tell you about that explains why that all shuts down after these so-called critical periods during development. So what happens when you're an adult and you want to change your brain? So now I'm going to get into stuff that hopefully is useful to you. Okay. So these basic facts, that changing your brain in a real way as an adult requires that you do particular things that activate particular chemical systems in your brain. So how do you do that, right? I could tell you all about the chemicals, and I will tell you a little bit about them, but how do you do it? Okay, so this is a right here, right now, urgent situation, car wreck. It's terrible. You could imagine any other trauma in its place. When that happens, a little area in the base of the brain, the name isn't important, but if you care, it's called nucleus basalis, does its job, which is it's an alert system. It puts all its attention on right here, right now, get everybody safe. It's your alert system. And it has this effect of dumping out a certain chemical called acetylcholine at specific locations in the brain that are paired with that experience. And forever, that experience will be traumatic unless something else is done, okay? So there's some nuance and some details to this, but that pretty much summarizes it. It's been replicated many, many times in dozens of studies. You can pair pretty much any experience with stimulation of nucleus basalis, this thing in the base of the brain, and that experience will be mapped or remapped in your brain as an adult. And that's remarkable. It's also exciting because then someone like me says, well, then how do I change my experience? How do I change the meaning of what happens? How do I change something from traumatic to positive? The good news is nucleus basalis is just a slave to whatever is exciting, traumatic. It likes emotion. It likes peaks and lows. And so if acetylcholine is released, that means you can massively change your brain at that moment with whatever's paired with it. And so when you get into a peak state here and you're jumping up and down, or in a really low state and you're thinking how miserable something is, you have to be really careful because those are the things that you're wiring in, all right? So you can move to a state like this about driving later if you form enough associations with driving to really eliminate, to override the fear, you need to create a positive experience in its place. So how do you do that? So I'm gonna tell you that the way to do that is not to think too hard and to not verbalize things too much. And this is coming from someone who spent 25 years, 3 times a week on a couch, letting subconscious things geyser up. And that's where I really learned that it was really the things that you don't realize that have the potential to have the most impact. But this power of emotion, the ability to couple really strong emotions with things, is so useful if you want to change your brain for the better. And the way you do that is clear in the physical space. We all know this story. There are many news cases like this. Woman's child stuck under car, superhuman strength. We heard a lot of amazing stories about desperation. JJ's story was one of desperation. She's like, no, I'm not gonna accept failure because failure in the case she was describing was potentially the death of her child. So desperation is a strong one and it's motivated by fear. But what if you're not in a desperate state and you really wanna do something? In that case, there's something remarkable. And then we should ask ourselves, why are children such great passive learners? They're not trying, they're just learning. They're coming home with all sorts of things, sometimes things you don't want them to come home with, right? It's because they have this element of play. And what is play? Play isn't just movement, although it includes movement. It's giving things everything you've got, but keeping it in perspective. It's that sweet spot of enjoying life and trying really, really hard at it at the same time. It's essentially what we all strive for. And there are these incredible cases throughout history. Famous scientists, because I grew up in a house where people, revered scientists like Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winner. He's most famous for bongo drumming naked on the roof of Caltech. And he became an amazing artist in his 60s, and he developed all sorts of other skills, and he always had this childlike way of looking at the world. He never let himself get stuck in his ways, never became a curmudgeon, and a remarkable man. And that's something that if you come away with nothing else, I encourage you to do that. You want your brain to change, stay light, stay loose, but give it everything you've got. It's tough, right? It's tough. All right, I'm gonna speed up a little bit here. There's also this question of people wanna do this, they want to accomplish this stuff, but it's hard, right? I mean, I'm talking, but it's hard to actually do these things. I'm going to give you a little tool in a couple slides to help you hack into these systems, into these neural systems that are about creativity, but also about drive and focus, right? I grew up in Silicon Valley, right? It's all about drive and focus. But you're also supposed to be like Steve Jobs, take walks with bare feet, imagine great things, and make billions of dollars. So how do you bridge those two things, right? I'm always like, wait, how do you, keep things in perspective, but give them your all. And you each have individual stories, I think, that reflect this, and I've really enjoyed hearing about them, and I enjoy hearing more in the remaining time of the meeting. So in the past, how do people tap into this acetylcholine system? How do they get their attention on something for 30 minutes? Cigarettes, amazing stimulants of the nicotinic acetylcholine system. Talk to artists, talk to musicians. They felt like something really dropped out for them when they found out cigarettes were really unhealthy and could kill you. I am not encouraging you to smoke cigarettes, but there is something remarkable, because they'll kill you through other ways. But there is something remarkable about nicotine stimulation. And then there are these things, these nootropics. And here I have to just have a disclosure, which is that I do I consult for a number of groups that are making nootropics, and I have some stake in these different ones. Qualia is one of them. I'm not telling you to take Qualia. The one thing I'd like you to do is go to the website, only because of the neurohacker.com website, only because the guys that are doing this are unselfish enough that they're organizing all the nootropics into a kind of information base of nootropic stuff. So I think that's useful, kind of like examine.com, something which I have nothing involved with, is great for if you're interested in supplements. There's this kid, I think he's like 10 years old or something, and he made this amazing website that organizes all the supplements into peer-reviewed studies. You can find everything you want there. So I'm just an information nut. That's basically what that's about. And then there's the question of like, what's next? A pill would be great. Meditation is awesome, but what if we could combine these things in really powerful ways? Or what if we could just create better forms of meditation? Not saying that what was been done in India and elsewhere for ages isn't remarkable, but that more people can access. And so there's a new kind of meditation that I'm encouraging you to try, and it's based on the neuroscience that we know. And I realize I'm out of time, but I promise this will only take 2 minutes. And we were able to do this as a group outside, and I'm happy to send you these slides. It's impossible to do indoors, but it goes something like this. It has to do with the fact that our goal is to get present, right? You breathe, you get present, you become less reactive. It's very important. Only in your daily life, you want to be present, but you also want to dream big and go for things and access your creativity, which is about being not present. It's about not right now, not being limited by right here, right now. But then you have to turn around that great idea and turn it into something you have to implement. So how do you bridge those things? One of the things that makes us remarkable is our ability to bridge time as a species. Again, my dog Costello doesn't wake up on New Year's Day, 2016, and say, 50 rabbits this year, you know? That's what makes dogs so present, and that's what makes us so neurotic, is that we leave this space, we go elsewhere, but leaving is good too, because leaving is the reason that Steve Jobs was able to create objects that didn't exist before, like the iPhone, that we're all such a slave to now, right? So, how do you do this? So there's 3 kinds of general themes of meditation. I'm not an expert in meditation, and then I promise I'll wrap up, which is the first thing you want to, what I recommend just trying. Try it and let me know. Send me an email, let me know how it goes. Is one meditation, very short, 5 minutes, where for one breath, you close your eyes and go internal, and you get behind, and some people call it the third eye, right? I'm gonna get the language wrong, but we all know what we're talking about. You get inside your breath. And then the second thing you do is you focus on something at a short distance. There's a powerful system in your brain when you focus both eyes on a single point, like a watchmaker making a watch, or you're reading. That state is accessing very specific channels in your brain that are very different from the one that when you close your eyes, okay? And it's called a vergence eye movement, when you put both your eyes on the same thing. And then the last one is the one that we get a lot of here, that feeling, awesome feeling when you go out to the beach, or you're on the top of a mountain, or you look at the horizon, or you arrive in New York City, if you're me, and you just go, oh my God, and you're defocused. And that's when these ideas, the creativity, kind of spontaneously geysers up from below. But then you have to get back and you need to get to work on something. And so what's been very powerful, and we're putting patients through this, or subjects in brain imaging, is this way of accessing all these different brain states is really about accessing different notions of space and time, trying to get access to your whole brain. And it's a short meditation. I recommend just one breath at each of these kind of stations, in your mind, up close and focusing on your hand, and out. And I'll repeat that a few times during my morning, or maybe once or twice during the day. It's quick, and we're getting remarkable feedback from the people that are doing this about the kind of state that it puts them in, both engaged and present with the bigger picture. And in the end, it's all about the bigger picture, right? Because it's about not just what you do with your life, but how you're gonna create good in the world. And so I'd like to stop there, rather. I call this space-time bridging, just because it sounds fine, and you need an acronym, so STB. And that's not because I want to own it. I just want people to use it and experience how great it's been for me and for the other people I've suggested it to. And then if you're interested in some of the other stuff that I'm doing, in 2017, there's going to be some more information coming out about how you can use these primitive states, either fear or, I prefer, positive states, in order to change the way that your brain works for the better. They're going to yank me off stage any second, and Mia's pretty fierce, so I'm going to go now. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.